There are wounds that leave no visible scar, but which shape every look, every word, every bond we weave. Some people spend their lives apologizing for existing without ever understanding why. They give too much, they feel too much, they exhaust themselves trying to be good enough for people who don't really see who they are. It's not a character flaw, it's an imprint, the one you carry when you grow up in a home where love was earned, where peace depended on a parent's mood, where childhood wasn't a refuge, but a place of constant alert. And these traces, even decades later, continue to shape our way of loving, trusting, and protecting ourselves. Today, we're going to dive into the heart of this invisible conditioning, the one that begins when you grow up with a narcissistic parent, and understand why it still influences our relationships, our choices, and even our perception of ourselves. Not to blame the past, but to emerge from it awake, to finally learn to love without losing ourselves. Growing up in a home where love depends on behavior, a tone of voice, or a look, means learning early on that affection is not a right, but a reward. The child senses, long before understanding, that his existence is disturbing as soon as it is not useful. He learns to observe, to adjust, to guess what to say, to maintain peace. He understands that silence is often better than the truth, that performance is worth more than sincerity. And little by little, he ceases to exist for himself. In these homes, love is not a welcoming space. It is a constant test. The narcissistic parent does not see the child as a whole being, but as a mirror. This mirror must reflect the image they want to project: brilliant, obedient, reassuring. If the reflection displeases, the child is ignored, criticized, or humiliated. So they learn to mold themselves, to erase what bothers them, to amplify what pleases them. And that's where the divide begins, between what they feel and what they show. The child of narcissistic parents grows up in deep confusion. He loves those who hurt him and feels guilty for needing them. He thinks that if he changes a little more, if he becomes better, love will finally come, stable and secure. But it never comes. Love is always dependent on one condition: being perfect, calm, loyal, silent. And this conditional love becomes the matrix of all his future relationships. We must understand what this creates in the body and mind: a state of constant alert. The nervous system remains tense, ready to detect the slightest change in mood, the slightest threat. This is not fear in the classic sense, it is learned vigilance. The child trains himself to guess the parent's emotions before they explode. He becomes an expert in the art of avoiding the storm. This hyper-awareness later becomes a form of identity. He believes his worth comes from his ability to adapt, to maintain the peace, to not disturb. But beneath this adaptation lies a more silent truth: the feeling of being invisible. The child no longer knows what he likes, what he wants, what he truly feels. He becomes what is expected of him, to the point of forgetting that there is an I separate from the gaze of others. And this absence of self becomes a wound that is not seen, but which directs everything. To be loved conditionally is to grow up without anchors. It is to search all one's life for that moment when love does not withdraw. It is to confuse affection with approval, security with control. And later, even as an adult, a part of oneself continues to seek that parental gaze, that invisible green light that would finally allow one to breathe, to be, without justification. This is how the cycle begins. A child who had to earn love becomes an adult who still believes he or she must earn it. And it all begins there, in that childhood where loving meant surviving, not living. What we don't see is often what governs the most. Children of narcissistic parents grow up with a malfunctioning internal compass. Their nervous systems have been raised in chaos and programmed to detect emotional danger before it even arrives. This isn't just fear, it's a way of life. Every glance, every change of tone, every sigh becomes a signal to be decoded. They don't live in the moment. They live in anticipation. Their bodies are tense. Their hearts are alert. Their minds are constantly observing. Love for them has never been restful. It has always required extreme vigilance. These reflexes, through repetition, become automatic. We learn to read people better than they read themselves. We pick up on micro-expressions, silences, fluctuations in energy. We detect tensions before they explode, and we adjust our behavior to avoid drama. From the outside, this may seem like great empathy, a rare sensitivity, but inside, it's a survival strategy. If I understand everything, maybe I will be safe. This talent for emotional reading becomes a shield, but also a prison. Because by living in the perception of others, we forget our own presence. The tragedy is that these mechanisms work too well. They protect, but they isolate. They allow us to navigate unstable environments, but prevent any real relaxation. In a relationship, this hyper-awareness becomes an invisible burden. We want to plan everything, control everything, understand everything before the other person speaks. We guess, we interpret, we repair, even when there is nothing to repair. And in the long run, it's exhausting. The body grows tired of constantly anticipating war. The heart becomes empty from adapting, and the mind moves away from the peace it seeks. It takes time to understand that this empathy isn't always love. It's often a form of fear. The fear of losing control, the fear of reliving rejection. We think we're protecting the relationship, but in reality, we're protecting the child we once were. It is a noble reflex, but misdirected. We want to save the past through the present. So how do you unlearn? It doesn't start with the head, but with the body. You have to retrain your nervous system to recognize safety, to feel it without suspicion. This is done slowly, in silence, often in simple gestures, breathing before reacting, remaining still when everything inside you wants to flee or please. Little by little, we discover that not everything is a threat, that not every silence heralds a storm, that not every disagreement is an attack. This moment is subtle, almost imperceptible, but it is where true healing begins. When the inner alert falls silent, even for a few seconds, when we realize we can remain present without monitoring. Only then does love become possible again. Not the kind we control, but the kind we welcome. There are people for whom quiet love is not reassuring. The silence of a stable relationship worries them. Gentleness puts them on the defensive. It's not because they don't want to love, but because their bodies don't recognize peace. For them, love has always had a taste of waiting, effort, and tension. So when someone loves them unconditionally, they doubt. They wait for the moment when everything changes. They look for the flaw, like a reflex, because they have learned that tenderness is often the beginning of a trap. When you grow up in a narcissistic environment, you associate love with struggle. It is believed that the more one suffers, the more real the connection is. We think that fear, jealousy, uncertainty are part of the feeling. And when someone comes with simple affection, without play, without distance, something in us resists. It is not a conscious choice. It is a memory of the body. The nervous system, accustomed to tension, confuses stability with boredom. It expects pain, and when it doesn't come, it provokes it. So we distance ourselves, we test, we question, we sometimes sabotage. Not to destroy, but to see if love will survive the hurt. We want to be sure that the other will stay, even when we show ourselves to be vulnerable. But this inner game is exhausting. It turns love into a testing ground. Every gesture becomes proof to be given. Every silence, a threat to be interpreted. And the other ends up feeling judged, trapped in a role he did not choose. That of yesterday's parent, the one we unconsciously try to heal through him. This is the great tragedy of children of narcissistic parents. They seek in adult love a reparation that only the inner gaze can offer. No partner can fill the void left by conditional love, because this void is not there to be filled, but to be recognized. Learning to love without testing is learning to breathe again. It's about staying present when calm seems suspect. It is to remember that peace hides nothing. It is understanding that passion does not need pain to be real. It is not mental knowledge. It is emotional re-education. The body must be taught that safety is not synonymous with danger, that gentleness does not precede a fall. And this reprogramming takes time, a lot of time, but it transforms everything. When we begin to accept the simplicity of love, it finally loses its test form. It becomes what it should always have been, a space where one does not need to earn one's place, a space where the heart is no longer at war with its memory, a space where love ceases to be a trial and becomes a refuge again. There is a form of disguise that we wear for so long that we forget it was not our skin. Many people created this mask from childhood, in silence and fear. It was a survival device. If I become what they expect, maybe they'll love me. Maybe they'll stop hurting me. And little by little, the role became reality. The child of narcissistic parents learns to mold himself to please, to avoid rejection. He becomes the one who guesses, the one who adapts, the one who smiles even when he bleeds. He tries never to be too disturbing, never to appear weak. And this emotional perfection becomes his second nature. But inside, something freezes. A voice falls silent. An eye disappears. In adulthood, this mask takes on new forms. We become the version the world prefers. The impeccable colleague, the attentive partner, the solid friend. Every word, every gesture is calculated to maintain an image that reassures others. We do everything to be loved, but we are never really seen. We exist through the eyes of others, as if our value depends on the perception of others. And when someone finally tries to see beyond the mask, it feels uncomfortable, because showing your true face means exposing yourself to the risk of not being enough. Shame arises from this, from the gap between what we show and what we are. She's not loud, she doesn't shout. She whispers. She says, "Don't be too yourself. Stay presentable. Control yourself." And the more we listen to it, the stronger it becomes. This shame prevents spontaneity, stifles joy, turns the truth into a threat. She makes people believe that you have to earn your place, that you have to perform to be loved. But the truth is, no perfection can replace presence. This mask, which we believe to be protective, ends up becoming a prison. It prevents breathing. It stifles the light. We protect ourselves from rejection, but we also deprive ourselves of true connection. Because no one can love a role. We can admire an image, applaud a performance, but to love, to truly love, requires an encounter with what is naked, fragile, true. Removing the mask is not a simple gesture. It is a slow return to oneself. It's daring to say no without justification. It's speaking even if your voice trembles. It's admitting that we don't always know how to please, that we won't always be understood, and that it doesn't matter. It is understanding that vulnerability is not a weakness, but a truth that we no longer need to hide. And paradoxically, it is at this moment, when the mask falls, when the facade crumbles, that authentic love becomes possible. Because for the first time, we're no longer trying to be perfect. We're trying to be real. There comes a time when surviving is no longer enough. We wake up one morning, tired of having to deserve what we already give, tired of always having to explain ourselves, of always justifying ourselves, tired of this vigilance that never fades. That day, something cracks inside, not in pain, but in new clarity. This is the beginning of repair, not the kind we do with our heads, but the kind that begins in the silence of the body. Unlearning survival is daring to release the fear that held everything together. It is recognizing that constant alert is no longer necessary. It's allowing yourself, for the first time, to fully inhabit what you feel, even if it's confusing, even if it's uncomfortable. For years, everything was filtered through the prism of danger. Is this safe? Is this right? Am I going to get hurt again? Healing begins when these questions cease to be a reflex and become a simple observation. When we no longer seek to repair the past, but to create the present. Repair is not about erasing what has been broken. It's learning to look at the crack without judgment. It is understanding that the pain was not in vain, that it shaped a finer, more lucid consciousness. Every time we choose truth over fear, something gets fixed. Every time we allow ourselves to be sincere without defending ourselves, a layer of armor falls away. And little by little, we discover a freedom that we had never known, that of existing without permission. The world doesn't change when you heal, but the way we perceive it, yes. What once seemed threatening becomes simply human. What once hurt deeply becomes a matter of understanding. We stop looking for saviors. We stop waiting for apologies that will never come. We choose each other, not out of selfishness, but out of clarity. And this choice, repeated every day, becomes a spiritual act. Because he says, I surrender to what I am, even if I do not yet fully recognize myself. Unlearning survival is learning to stay present when the old reflex whispers to flee. It is staying open when everything inside you wants to close. It is welcoming love without waiting for betrayal. It is understanding that security is not found in control, but in trust. And this trust no longer depends on anyone. It comes from a place no parent has been able to reach, no wound has been able to destroy. The still center within oneself, the one that has always known. This is not a step backward. It is a slow birth, a birth to oneself, in the moment, to this peace that we no longer beg for, because we finally know that it comes from within. And when this peace settles in, even timidly, the need to survive fades away. So, for the first time, we live, simply, entirely, here. The truth is, healing isn't a sudden miracle. It's a silent commitment to yourself. It's that moment when you stop negotiating your worth, when you decide you deserve peace, even if your body doesn't recognize it yet. Healing from a controlled childhood isn't about becoming better. It's about becoming whole again. It's about stopping punishing yourself for surviving something you never should have experienced. And from that moment on, something changes. You stop looking for the love that proves your worth. You start choosing the love that recognizes it. If these words resonate with you, don't just let them pass. Revisit them. Think about them. Because true awakening begins the day you decide to no longer survive, but to live. And if this video spoke to you, please share it. Not for views, for awareness, because somewhere, someone needs to hear that they're not the problem, and that healing, yes, is